Welcome back to the second episode, the second part of what is Kerbal Space Program tutorial and how to do stuff in Kerbal Space Program. The last episode we built a plane, this plane, tested it and talked about characteristics of planes. In this episode we're going to test rockets and what you need to know to build them. And therefore, we're going to start similarly to what you need to have for building a plane. First of all, you need something to control your rocket, which is a command pod. And I've chosen a small command pod just because it's easier. And then again, you need to know what your rocket is supposed to do. This one here is supposed to land back on the planet or on a world with atmosphere, and therefore it needs a parachute. Otherwise my capsule will just plummet down into the ground and explode. And this is something I don't want. And then it's also going to need a decoupler between the capsule and the rest of the rocket, because I want to separate it. And I can only do that with a decoupler. Next step is I need myself a stage which is capable of maneuvering in orbit. And therefore it needs fuel. You have to keep in mind that rocket fuel or rockets are vastly more inefficient than jet engines. And knowing that, you cannot just think that it's as easy as using jet fuel to get places. Rocket fuel will deplete much quicker. Yes, so since 0.21 you also need solar panels, otherwise your craft will deplete in electricity. Oops, wrong key. And I'm going to add 2 solar panels, and that's it. Now, well, not entirely. Let's go over it in depth completely. For easiness purpose, I'll cover that in a different video, how to dock, in what your design requirements are to dock crafts in orbit. So, this is your orbital maneuvering stage. As you see it here, it should be fairly capable. I don't know. Really fairly capable. Differently to planes, that require wings, for rockets, you need to know a different thing. And this doesn't come with wing size, how much lift your plane will develop. No, it's called delta V. And this basically are the movement points of your rocket. Once you're in orbit, you don't have any resistance any longer, so every bit of velocity you add is permanently. And delta V is how much each stage of the rocket can add to the rocket's velocity. So, once again, this requires maths. And what it basically is you need to look at the engine's efficiency to start calculating your delta V. For example, the Poodle has the engine's efficiency is when you look at the biggest square of the engine stats. There's engine max power, engine min power, and ISP. The ISP in vacuum is what we're going to look at. This is the efficiency in vacuum. 0 pressure. 390. And this is a fairly good engine when you go and look at the stats. 390. Note we added with the small LV909. Okay, let's drag off the decoupler again. Now you have step 1 of calculating your delta V. Step 2 requires you to know the vehicle mass as it is full and the vehicle mass as it is empty. This vehicle probably masses, these are 0.5 tons, and this is 2.75 tons, 2.85 tons, and 0.6 is 3.45 tons, 3.55 tons, and this here makes 3.6 tons vehicle mass. Okay. Step 2 is a logarithmic part of the equation. Once you have the efficiency, you write a multiplier sign and open words. I probably have it written on the screen. You put it into brackets, the next mathematic arguments, and you put the natural logarithm of the vehicle wet mass, which we now calculated, and you subtract the vehicle dry mass, which is 2 tons less in this vehicle. It's 1.6 tons. And then you close all the brackets and multiply that by the acceleration of gravity on Kerbin, which is 9.81 meters a second. For me, because I live in a place where metric units are, I don't know if I'm going to go through the trouble and put all the shenanigans I now told you about in pounds and stuff, but it's very similar. You just need to put in the accelerations in feet per second, and the mass in pounds, and the efficiency is the same. So you'll get to the same result. Just the numbers are different because your base units are different. And let's take our friend the calculator, and let's calculate this bad boy's delta V. It says this thing has a delta V of 3,102 meters per second. Okay, this design probably gets us to most places we ever need to go. Okay, next point is, how do I get this in orbit? And this is a little more complicated, I have to say. That's the wrong adapter. Wrong adapter. That looks like that doesn't look good. Do I have the right adapters here? I do not seem to have. Bugger. Yep. I don't seem to have the right adapters here. Oh well. Next step is the ascent stage. This is a very light design, so it's probably enough to put in a big fuel tank and a small fuel tank like this, and in between put an engine. That doesn't look. And now I'm going for looks. This is the worst type of situation. Okay, put in a decoupler. Nah, that's not enough thrust. The Rockomax engine will have depleted the lower stage too quickly. Yeah. Let's put that here and put on a skipper engine. That's fairly more capable. Now let's put on there's the Rockomax size decoupler, and after that let's add the immediate ascent stage. I hope that has enough delta V to reach orbit. I've stopped calculating that. As you now see, it looks like a fairly good rocket. Okay. Now, this rocket, probably as it is, flies to orbit if you're lucky. Because it's a very wobbly rocket as it's now. Therefore, you need to add a little bit of structural stability. And that's what I'm doing right now. Add a few struts. Okay, this connected to my engine, which was not what I wanted it to do. This connected to the engine again. Our struts again. And that should be very stable. So, oh yeah, I forgot something. Let's pull off the this engine and put a normal sized fuel tank underneath, which I apparently can't do because the Rockomax engine is in the way. Okay. Then let's add a little structural support to this here. Look at how it... yeah, that looks good enough. Okay. Now then, this rocket is largely finished. It's structurally supported and strong. So, now you've cleared the basic parts. This is the tutorial rocket. Welcome back. So, we're now at the runway. Not runway. I read runway here and immediately say it. No, at the launch pad. A rocket is successfully placed on it and ready to lift off. I noticed that I messed up in the staging bar here. I forgot to tell you about, since I took it for granted that you could see it. In the editors, it's on the right side of the screen, and you notice engines and decouplers and engines and decouplers, and everything on this is preset up correctly, except for the launching clamps. And each time I press the spacebar, it will activate the tab with the highest number. So spacebar press, it will activate the engine and release the clamps. Another time it will activate this decoupler, my cursor is hovering above, and another press it will activate the engine above. This is how you fly the rocket. So, next thing is, let's go to space. And as you see, it flies very well. I'm going to yaw a bit to the right. And if you would play normal Kerbal Space Program, you would probably take a different ascent trajectory because the atmosphere is modeled differently, and for me it's very inefficient to just stop accelerating in Ferrum Aerospace Research, but in normal you really waste a lot of fuel going this fast. In Ferrum Aerospace Research you don't. And therefore you just choose a different ascent trajectory. I think I should now yaw over a bit. As you saw, the rocket just tumbled a bit, but it got itself back under control because I placed the control surfaces in a correct way. As you also see, this thing has a fairly bigger amount of delta V than I anticipated. Came in the stabilizer, throttle up to maximum, and you also now saw how I make an ascent in Ferrum Aerospace Research. Let's check the map, so that our apoapsis doesn't get too huge. We should probably throttle down a little, to not accelerate too fast. And then it's now all about coasting to apoapsis. Or rather, finishing our ascent in the correct way. 51 kilometers. Yep. This looks fairly good. 60 kilometers. Normal rocket descents take much longer. Why is my SAS still online? No, I know why my rocket freaked out like that. 70 kilometers. And we're going to be out of fuel soon. 80 kilometers. 92. Out of fuel. So now we're going to separate this stage. Activate the next engine. And we have to watch our electricity budget, because torque wheels now take electricity. And for the record, this wasn't an optimal ascent I took, because it still is too shallow, but it was for talking over the ascent and stuff, I think I was a fairly good ascent trajectory. Okay. Next step is completing our orbit. This requires us to... Dear SAS, please do not intervene in my plans. You can now intervene in my plans. I'll need a... Oh, I'm starting too early. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 20 seconds. Okay. Apoapsis is in 25 seconds, so we have a bit of time left before I need to accelerate further. And we're now going to make a circular orbit. I'm above 1500 meters a second, and I'd say this was a fairly successful test run. Okay, we now have a periapsis, and because I don't want space junk, I'm going to separate this stage. The game will now let this stage be deleted in the atmosphere, and we can now go on the last stage and finish our orbit. I know it was an inefficient design that way, but I didn't calculate anything, and I think for not calculating a thing about your rocket except for the last stage, I've done a fairly good job. Okay, so we're now in orbit. We've successfully established ourselves, gotten into orbit, flown a rather good ascent, and I think I've shown you what you need to know to build and fly a rocket. It doesn't really differ in any great way, shape or form from flying a rocket without Ferrum Aerospace Research, except for the fact that control surfaces in Ferrum Aerospace Research grab much harder into the wind and therefore have a much bigger impact on how your rocket performs on the way up. And also how stalls and stuff affect your rocket's performance. But when you're then out of orbit, the game is essentially the same. I think that's it. Jeb is happy, is in orbit, and I think I'm going to leave him there. Okay, that's it for this episode of what Kerbal Space Program is about and how to do in it. I've covered the questions: how do you build a rocket? And what do you need to know about Delta V? The next video is going to be about how to maneuver in space and to get places. And for this, I'm going to use our tutorial rocket. What else? It should technically still have something like 2,800 meters a second Delta V. And for the last part of how to do in it, I'm going to need to make a new design. Because this is the utmost final question: how do I travel interplanetary? But that's it from me, boys and girls, guys, awesome people you watch me. I I hope you liked all the tutorials I made so far. Please leave some feedback how you think they are. And as in the previous video, any questions that might arise from my videos or I left unanswered, do not feel hesitant to ask these in the comments. I'll answer them. And if it's enough questions, I'll probably make another video about it. But that's it from me, guys, girls, boys. Thanks for watching. Have a good time.